Welcome to Pirate Living Podcast. We're your hosts, Karan and Kristen. On this podcast, we are highlighting ordinary people living extraordinary lives. These are pirates who take small, bold actions daily to create social change. Pirate life is all about rebelling and breaking the rules for good. Creating lasting social change starts by first breaking our inner rules. After all, the hardest rules to break are your own. The pirates we highlight have dedicated themselves to creating good trouble.
Today we are talking with Dana Pharant. Dana is a dominatrix, life coach, and successful entrepreneur. Through her experiences, Dana has learned to live a life in full surrender. Dana lives life by her own rules, going against society, and is paving the way for others to see sex in a way that is healthy and unique for them. And Dana, thank you for talking with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Arr, mateys, I'm aboard. If we're going to talk pirates, we got to do the R.
Yeah. Still haven't gotten the ARG though.
I think there is a Talk Like a Pirate Day.
There is.
Yeah. We have not capitalized.
You haven't
this.
embraced that.
No.
Oh, sound bites, ladies.
Yeah.
Sound bites.
Mental note, Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Yes.
Excellent.
So yeah, Dana, we want to hear about you and your story because you've been living life by your own rules. And it's not always been the case. You've experienced a life of restriction in a minor cult, and then you experienced a life of overindulgence once you left. So we'd love for you to take us on a journey of your pirate adventures and tell us what brought you to where you are today.
Okay, so buckle in. It's a bit of a journey. So I grew up in a religious cult. So I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and my parents were extremists in it. So, it is a cult by definition. And then my parents kind of took it and, ramped it up even further. So I left when I was just before I turned 18. And in order to leave that particular cult, you have to leave everyone behind. So I had family, I had friends, I had people that had become family. And that was really the start of, what you guys call the pirate life, is that me choosing to live life on my own terms. I knew I couldn't stay in that. I knew I had to choose for me. So here I was just, not even 18, sheltered life, secluded from the world, but all I know is I have to get out. So I leave, and then I've spent basically the next 20 years trying to figure out who I am, because when people leave a cult, they end up reverting back to who they were prior to the cult. It takes a few years, but growing up in one, there is no reference to that. So I realized, in hindsight, that I spent a good 20 years having this extreme experience. So I would dive headfirst into drugs, sex, and rock and roll, not in a healthy way, and, really going all out there. And then I would spend a few years on the other side, complete abstinence from all the things. And I did this with all the various things in my life. So, and I made myself wrong for a long time with this, but when I started to realize, I was just trying to figure out who I was, because once I experienced both sides, then I could come to this middle point, whatever my middle point was, and say, okay, this is what works for me. But I had to experience both those extremes in order to figure out what was my middle point. And, that really started formulating, okay, who do I want to be in the world? How do I want to move? And of course, through that, I also, developed a career, became a massage therapist, opened up a couple of massage therapy clinics, a supply outlet for the spa industry. And concurrent to that, in my personal life, I became a dominatrix. So I got really involved in the kink world, and there, inside of that, I experienced some really profound healing. And it sounds kind of weird. It's like, okay, so I have all this abuse from my childhood. I'm going to go get somebody to beat me so that I can heal. Sounds really weird, right? But it was dynamic because you can script a different outcome. It allows you to actually, or allowed me, I should talk about me. It allowed me to find my power again, find my voice, and reclaim all of that. So in those experiences, that was what prompted me to want to become a dominatrix, because I have, of course, a healing background. I love the psychology. And here was a great tool for helping people to release trauma from their bodies. It was so powerful, so beautiful. And, so that was all going on in my personal life. Business, was doing really great, had a 7-figure business, but hit a bankruptcy and realized, again, it's like that hindsight. About a year after the bankruptcy, I started to be able to turn around and look and kind of go, okay, what was going on other than the obvious, right? The obvious was we had too much inventory. We had customers that didn't pay their bills. We had somebody break into our merchant account, steal thousands of dollars. Those were the obvious things. But the subtler piece was that I had separated out this piece of who I was as a dominatrix in my personal life and who I was as a business owner. But I needed the skills to be blended together. I needed to bring them in. And when I started to bring them in, then I noticed there was this like dynamic on-off switch. If I brought in the dominatrix energy, sales went up. If I let it slide, sales went down. So I was like, okay, I need to bring all of me in and integrate them in together. And so that was my path for quite a while, was really playing with this inner dominatrix theme, inviting people to, claim the energy of this. And then in the last few years, I've had like another awakening because this is my life. I just like constantly like, okay, time to morph again. It's been 5 years. We need something new. So 2 years ago now, I said I was done with my marriage, and that wasn't working for me. And then, we had a year of trying to figure out how we were going to navigate the separation. Of course, housing market being what it is. Eventually I realized, what, I have this calling. I have like this irking at me. Like, it's like somebody constantly tapping my shoulder. You need to get out and travel. You need to go do something. You need to like go. It's not about having a plan. And so I finally leaned into it because I had been saying for years, I can work anywhere. I can work remotely. I can travel and work, like I'd had this itch. So when I ended the marriage and we were able to finally get things separated, I got him to buy me out. It was like, okay, here I have this opening. So July 1st last year, 2022, I hit the road without a plan, without determining where I need to go. And this is my current rebellion. I'm following the universal nudges. So I call it universe. Some people call it spirit, God, whatever. And I'm going where I'm guided to go. So I'm going for where the experiences I need, like what experiences I need to experience. Right? And they didn't come out super smooth, but that's what I've been on lately. And in this journey is a deeper awakening of the sexuality and, getting reconnected on another level with kink, all of these pieces. So that's kind of like the highlight reel of my life.
So I'm curious, what got you started with the dominatrix in the very first, like being a dominatrix in the first place? Like, how did that even start? And we just lost Kristen, by the way. So she'll be back.
Hi.
She'll be back.
Hi.
There we go.
Sorry for the distraction.
That's all right. She was frozen. Okay. So that the interest came, so I was a massage therapist and I had a client who came in and she disclosed that she was involved with kink. And we started these conversations. So every time she came in, I'm like picking her brain. I'm like, why do people like this? And, so getting into specifics of different acts and different modalities. And I'm like really diving into the psychology of why is it, what does it do for people? I wanted to know beyond the obvious. So that was the start of that spark. And then, like I said, in the beginning, I explored more the submissive side and had this profound healing. And that was the last spark that I needed to really, go full into learning the art and the craft of being a dominatrix.
So how does someone learn the art and craft of being a dominatrix? Is there a dominatrix school, or do you have like a mentor? Like, how do you learn that?
Yeah, I had many mentors. There wasn't as much obvious training as there are now. And now there are people, and I'm actually one of the people that do some of the training in conjunction with a good friend of mine. She's also a pro dom. And so there's a lot of training. It's not so much just the physical, like the physical part of it is actually really easy. the psychology, knowing people's psychological triggers, knowing what's going on, how to keep them safe, both physically and psychologically. That's an important piece. And then there's also a huge component that people don't think about, but it's what is my journey in this? To be at a place where I can say openly, hey, I'm a pro dominatrix, because honestly, it's in the sex world. It is in the sex trade.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to be comfortable in saying that takes a lot of inner journey, inner healing,
Mm-hmm.
coming to terms with it. It is very rebellious.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people that you're generally working with then? Who's coming to see you as a pro dominatrix?
Yeah, so it is the stereotypical privileged white male who has done well, and I would say that they have a longing to surrender, but they've never had to. They've never really had a lot of people saying no to them. Some of them are very privileged in that they're also very attractive and tall and fit, and so they don't get the no very often at work or with women or anywhere. And so there's this craving to have that surrender experience, but nobody's ever put them in their place. And that's where having a professional, and again, like this is where the psychology comes in. I have to be at a place where I am okay with the pushback, because it's going to be pushback, because you've never experienced this, right? So to finally get what you're looking for in this, like, here's how you surrender. And they're like, no, I'm just going to do it this way. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. Muffin, no. No, this is my dungeon. You're going to do what I tell you to do. But ultimately, I think a lot of people are craving the experience of surrender, however you get there, whether it's yoga, meditation, or in the dungeon, or with a massage. There's a lot of avenues, but some people need and crave that more intense situation. Let's call it that.
So what is that that surrender? What does that bring to somebody? Like, I can imagine, having all that privilege. What would make them want to crave that, having that surrender experience?
So on the surface, it is, if I'm to put myself in his shoes, like, I've always been large and in charge. I'm always the one responsible. I have, I probably have a large company that I am the one that is responsible for everybody. So there's a craving for balance. Surrender creates that balance of, when you always have so much responsibility, then to be somewhere where you're not the one making the decisions, you're not the one choosing, is a balance point. Then the other really big piece that I think a lot of people don't understand is that there is a space, so when people do transcendental meditation, and they do it for a long time, they reach this like Zen, like space of void, nothingness. That is easier to attain inside of the dungeon, because you work with physical pain and pleasure at the same time. So pleasurable touch, and then pain, and you're mixing those two, and it allows the endorphins to kick into the body, and it allows the person to actually drop into that void. And that's what so many people are craving. They're looking for all these experiences that drop them into this sense of, nothingness, and at the same time connected with everything. And so that is huge draw. Like, if you've experienced that, man, that's the best drug. Really is.
Yeah, there a lot of things with that surrender too, because it makes sense to me. I came from a very conservative background of, like, you don't talk about sex, really, like, not really. It's something that you do because my parents had kids, like everybody in the church I went to, like, they all have kids. You do it, but you don't talk about it, and you pretend like it doesn't happen. And so for me, just learning too, it's okay to talk about, and it's okay to explore different interests, and learn and be curious. Like, these things are actually okay. It's not just like, oh, we'll have sex because it's what you do because you're married and you gotta procreate. But like what you were saying too with the helping get past old trauma events that had happened by changing the script, like that also it makes so much sense to how powerful that can be, because say in the past there's a rape situation and now you can turn it around, and that's something that just isn't talked about enough either, especially coming from a very conservative area where you don't talk about anything regarding sex. Like it's powerful to talk about like how being able to take control of your sexuality, it's how it's possible, and then doing it in a safe manner with somebody who is going to make sure that, like, even though the control is in your hands, like you're still making sure that they're safe and that this isn't going to go out of control. So it's such a big thing.
It is. And, I've been saying to people lately, I'm like, we don't talk about sex, but why is that? Like, why can't you share with somebody that it's like, you've had this amazing, beautiful sexual experience in the same way that you share with somebody, oh my God, I went to this amazing restaurant, right? Like one is okay, but the other is not. And yet they're both about experiencing pleasure. You had this pleasurable experience and you want to share it with somebody, but it is just conditioning that says it's not okay to talk about sex. What's not okay is to force it on somebody who's not okay listening to it. That's what's not okay. Like that's crossing boundaries. But I think if we start to open things up, then the repertoire of like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. Like, wow, what a great idea. Let me try that. Like my girlfriend and I, she's also a pro-dom, like we will swap stories and talk about what do we do in our sessions. And because it's great for exchanging ideas, like, ooh, that's a good one. Oh, and we'll actually like play off of it and come up with more scenarios. So it's actually opens the mind. And then for me, I really, really believe that sex is about play, and it's about, really getting to know your body and allowing yourself to have pleasure. So when we can talk about it, then we can ask for what we want. We can say, hey, I like it when you do this, or how about you not do it that way? A little to the left, a little to the right, harder, faster, simple little instructions that can make all the difference, especially as women. Like our bodies change day to day, month to month. And so what we want and what we like changes. And so it's really important to learn how to verbalize that.
So
I feel like I'm hogging your time.
No. Giving us so much to think about. I'm like, what do you even ask next? Like, I know where do you go from here?
And my internet's like, it's telling me it's not unstable over here. I'm like, no,
it's not the day to be unstable.
No.
So what would you say with the work that you do is your social rebellion?
I'd say it's first and foremost just that permission to talk a little more openly about sex, and permission to acknowledge that it's okay to seek pleasure, your own pleasure, and really, particularly for women. Men are pretty good about seeking their own pleasure, but I think women have been so terribly conditioned not to. And yet on a physical level, like when we look at the body and the dynamics, the clitoris, the only function, ladies, the only function of the clitoris is pleasure. That's it. So you're hardwired to receive pleasure. And if I could only just get that one piece across, like that will blow people's worlds wide open to just start thinking in terms of, it is your right, your birthright, your God-given right, however you want to say it, to have pleasure for the sake of pleasure. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
But why do you think like we're so conditioned otherwise? Like, why is female sexuality so
Oh my God.
suppressed?
Highlight reel is that there's and this is, you trace it back pre-Christianity. Female sexuality was a lot more open. There was a lot more empowerment. Paganism, Wicca, those kinds of things embraced female sexuality. The church, and this is where I know I'm going to be unpolitical here, but really Christianity, Christianity coming in really fucked us over.
Yeah, so ruined everything.
And the reality is that if you want to control women, the biggest way to control women is to remove their ability to have pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
When we're not having pleasure, we don't feel in our power, because ladies, our power sits in our pussy. So if you want to remove the power, you remove the sexual pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And then that whole layer of oppression and the conditioning to say it's about men's pleasure, and who cares if you have an orgasm. Like, you look at how most people are moving. I know prior to my being willing to ask, like, so many bad sexual experiences where it was like, I was like, he's like, I'm done. I'm like, I haven't even started.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of warm up, a little bit of something, but we're taught not to ask for it. And I think it really comes from that thousands of years of conditioning in which it's not okay for women to be sexual beings, because if we are, we're powerful, and then we're scary to men and the powers that be.
Well, it's so funny how demonized, it's not funny at all. Women that are sexual beings are just so demonized in history, and even in like today's culture. I mean, I think it's getting a little bit more open and accepted, but I mean, sexual women are not looked upon as like the good women. You've got to be, the virgin and like all of these things, that those are the good women, right? And it's just crazy to me that like, it's crazy.
It is
as
crazy. And even still, we still have a lot of stigma around prostitution. And I know there's multiple layers, but let's just look at people who choose to go into sex work. And who are empowered with it. They like it, they're enjoying it, they keep themselves safe. We have so much stigma about that in general. And there's, think about all the songs and the Pretty Woman and, all those things that are all about rescuing the prostitute. And, the song Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light, right?
It's like the first thing that came to my mind when you said that.
I'll refrain from singing. So
I'll come.
It's already playing in my head.
I know.
Good. An earworm for everybody.
Yeah.
But it is that idea of that we need to rescue people from this, as opposed to celebrating. Like, I think there's a huge place for empowered sex workers, that it can open up doors. It can have a space where it's like, okay, let me learn, let me try things out. Or if we're talking about, couples and they want to bring in a third, you know what? It's a lot cleaner to just hire somebody who's not going to muck up your marriage, right? And it's agreed upon. You have it all lined up. It's like, okay, here's the rules, here's the parameters, and then thank you very much, good night. As opposed to bringing in a third who's like, oh, it's just, it could get ugly. But like, and learning about healthy sexuality, maybe go to somebody who's an expert. Would not an empowered sex worker be an expert? My thought. But yeah, there's all kinds of things with that.
How do you set your boundaries and make sure that you're okay in the work that you do?
Okay, so here is where there are a couple of schools of doing things. So there are the dominatrixes, who I would say are like fetish dispensers. They cater to clients. It's like clients that comes in, they want to role play, medical play, and so the person will set up a medical situation and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And that's more just like customer service. Just here, you're ordering up what you want. Going to McDonald's, I'd like some fries. For me, the work is about dropping in and creating a space that they can surrender. So I don't let clients dictate what's going to happen in the session. We have an extensive intake, if you want to call it an intake, but it's looking at what are your hard limits, what's okay, what's not okay, what do you maybe want to do. And in that, also me getting to know why do you want those things.
Mm.
And then after that extensive intake, then we'll have a first session to see how the person responds physically. And then, ongoing sessions would be about they come in, I'm in charge.
Mhm.
They're not dictating.
Mhm.
So people who have gone through that level of screening with me, I've already vetted. I already get a sense of whether they're a wanker or not.
Mhm.
It's the people who are doing it more as what I call the fetish dispensers, who allow clients to come in on the same day. They're not screening them enough. Those are the ones that put themselves at risk.
Mm.
Because if you don't put protocols in place to make people jump through a few hoops, then you get the wankers coming in.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm not interested in that scenario. And
Mhm.
I want to be in charge. I want people who really want to surrender,
Mm.
and I make them work for it.
So what would be some of the red flags that you look for?
So it first and foremost for me is like spidey sense. You just know,
Mhm.
right? So what I do for me is I drop into the space of I don't care whether this client comes to me or not. So
Mhm.
I'm not attached to whether I get them as a client.
Mhm.
And then I'm assessing. I can just, say, okay, I start asking the questions. Why do you want to see a dominatrix? Have you before? It's very typical of any business.
Mhm.
Why do you want to do this? What do you want as an outcome? And start getting a bit of information and start to look for if their language is all around their pleasure, that they're looking for an orgasm. It's like, yeah, we're not a good match, because that's not going to happen. Like, you don't get to ejaculate in the dungeon. And if I say to people, like, you don't get to ejaculate, and they're like, what? I'm like,
Mhm.
ooh, not a good fit.
Mm.
Because, and that's really important for a lot of dynamics, me being female and most of my clients being male, because for men, ejaculating puts them into that primal, like, they want to take over. And so
Mm.
when you don't allow them to have that, then they can stay in that submissive surrender position.
Mm.
And so that's a primary reason, and it's still illegal. So, twofold.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm.
But I think it's very much like anything. I mean, when I did massage therapy, I would do the same kind of screening. I'd
Mhm.
never book people on the same day, because those were the ones that, possibly shady, looking for something else.
Mhm.
I've gone from one profession that people think it's about sex to another profession where people think it's about sex, and neither one is.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it's kind of funny.
And yeah, so how has that, like, going into full surrender, how is that impacted now the other areas of your life with work? Because you said too, like, when you go into more dominatrix mindset with your business, like, things change. So yeah, tell us more about that as well, how learning to surrender fully has changed for you.
So I would say, pardon me, the biggest thing is I'm not hustling anymore. So I'm not out there trying to rig the system to like create the funnel. I'm relaxed about clients will find me. I keep showing up where I feel guided to go and letting things drop in. So one small example, prior to the surrender journey, I was like, oh, I need to get into Forbes. I need to find somebody who's like writing for Forbes and they can write me up. And then I had to like stop all those things. I let it go. And now I've got somebody that's reached out to me. He's like, hey, pitch me an idea. We'll put you in the next Forbes article that I'm writing. Right. It's that, like, me just going, and I just show up. I am doing what I'm doing, speaking my truth, if you want to call it that. And that ends up creating people to come reach out to me instead of me always having to like find them. I just got an invitation to be a keynote for a conference. Like, this is like, all the things are just coming in. I'm letting them come in. It's that receiving, which is surrender, letting it come in. And then when I'm nudged by the universe of like, hey, go do this, then I go do it because there's always a reason for it.
How we've talked to quite a few pirates who like have become nomads, and it seems like a thing that our pirate living just calls us to like hit the open road. What does that look like for you? I know you talked a little bit about like going where you feel called, but like, are you camping? Are you like, you got an RV? Like, what does that look like for you? I'm just curious.
This past year, it's been Airbnbs, a few friends along the way, couch surfing. Mostly Airbnbs is what I've been. Yeah. I was going to do the camper thing. That was when my head was still in control mode. And I'm like, get the camper. Okay. I got a car that can pull the camper. And then realized that no, that's not actually what I need to do because I'm going to have to fly out of the country. So it's going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Where has your travels taken you so far? Where's the coolest place your travels taken you so far? Like the coolest like experience.
I would say Costa Rica, a place called Dolphin Quest, which is down close to Golfito in Costa Rica, southern Pacific coast. And Dolphin Quest is this amazing spot. I had so much resistance. Honestly, I will admit it. I'm like, no, I don't want to, like, it's way too rustic. It's basically glamping. I'm like, oh, I don't know. So I resisted. And then, we were down in Pavones to do a kinky retreat thing. So one of our excursion days, we ended up at Dolphin Quest for lunch. And as soon as I stepped foot on the land, I was like, oh my God, I have to stay here because the land has been loved and protected and it's backing onto virgin jungle. And so you've got all this amazing energy there. Food is almost all farm to table, which was incredibly healing for my body. And then, lots of activities that I could do. And so I was building up strength. That was so magical for me to be in a space where I'm not having to constantly monitor for people and land energy and doing the work. So I could actually use that energy to heal me. It was amazing. Highly recommend it.
Put it on the list.
Yes.
Like I want to go.
Yes, it was great. It's like it is a little more on the rustic side, but it is an incredible experience, for reset for your body and soul, all the things.
Dolphin Quest, you said?
Yeah, Dolphin Quest CR is dolphinquestcr.com is their website. Happy to promote them.
Yeah. So what does it look like being in full surrender mode while being nomadic? Like, is it pretty much a flow from place to place? Do you know where you're gonna go? And yeah, have you been getting surprised with adventures other than Dolphin Quest that you didn't expect?
Lots of surprises. Yeah. So how it's worked for me is that I usually only just get a nudge of where the next place is. Where am I going next? Sometimes it is where I'm going, but I can't book anything. And that's usually an indication of like something needs to drop in when I get there. So when I left Canada, I went to Bali and then East Malaysia and then Costa Rica. So I got those hits for where I was going and the dates I was going so that I could book my flights. Grateful. That was a little cheaper to do it far in advance. But that's all I was able to book was like, okay, that doesn't clip there. So sometimes I'm like up until the day before, I don't know where I'm going. And it is a matter of trusting and letting that free fall happen, which for a recovering control freak is kind of scary at first, but I'm like, I'm zen with it now. My next adventure is heading up to the Yukon, going up there for 2 weeks. So I've booked for 3 nights and then I don't know. I've been completely surrender and I can't wait to see what adventures I end up getting into there. So
amazing.
Yeah.
That's also definitely on my to-do list, going up to the Yukon.
Yeah, I know. The universe is sending me in May. It's really cool.
Amazing.
The control freak in me is like, oh man, could I do that? And I mean, I've been working really hard on releasing this control freak. And even with that, I'm like, could I go somewhere and not know where I'm going after 3 days?
It challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My upcoming vacation has spreadsheets involved. So I get it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like, I think every moment of that, like, or of my holidays is planned.
It's okay, Kristen. Come to the jungle, or come to the dungeon. Sorry, not the jungle. And you can have 2 hours of surrender, and then go back to your
there we go
spreadsheets.
What is the other work that you do? You mentioned that you're like a life coach as well. Was that wrapped in with being a dominatrix, or is that separate? It is.
I mean, the psychology is very important with the dominatrix work. Because pretty much everybody has some sort of trauma. Usually their desire for kink is founded in either a trauma or just, something that got imprinted at a young age. So it's good to understand that. And then, I've worked for years with people with their minds. I used to say it's helping them to get their head out of their ass. I love working with business owners, because you think that what you need is the systems, but really we just need to get you sorted out so you stop being a control freak and, let things fall into place as opposed to trying to push the wrong thing into place.
I like what you said too about those traumas. That's something that we don't tend to think about, because a lot of times when people think about trauma, they think about the big ones. And with sex, you look at it and like, well, was there sexual abuse there somewhere? But we don't think about all those little traumas, which for me were growing up in a church that didn't talk about sex and that left sex is for marriage and every abstinence is what you need up until this point. And we're not going to talk about it. And we're going to just pretend like it doesn't exist. I didn't realize how traumatic that was for me until about 4 years ago. And it's been something that's had to be unraveled. So yeah, I like too how you point out, like we have in life too, those bigger events, like things that you see as a big trauma versus those littler events that build up. So yeah, things that we don't realize are sticking points for us.
Yeah, good for you for recognizing, what's going on, because it is this crazy thing. Like sex and money are the two things, and less so with money, but definitely with sex, that it's like, okay, we're not going to talk about it, and somehow you should magically be really good at it once you get there. Like, but don't ever ask anybody what you're supposed to do
No.
or how it works
No.
or what you need to know, right? Like there's so many things, so many basic things that can really just adjust. Like, okay, I feel called to say this, but it's a simple little thing. For most women, they don't realize that they need to go pee after you have intercourse of any kind, that there's a need biologically. Like that's helps to keep the body healthy, preventing UTIs. So, if you're constantly getting them, I mean, there's also another component that your partner may be carrying it and passing it on every time. But little simple things that if we don't talk about it, then we don't know that, like, hey, here, you can keep yourself healthy with just this simple little piece. Get up and go pee. Woo.
I'd rather talk about sex than money.
Yeah.
There's a whole other topic. Yeah. It's interesting. We have a lot of stigmas about both. Really. There's lots to unpack. Yeah. But we'll just pause it there.
What does good trouble mean to you? When we talk about good trouble on this podcast all the time, what does it mean to you? And I mean, I think we already know how you're creating good trouble, but yeah, what does that mean to you?
I think for me, like I don't know whether it's the dominatrix piece or just always having been a rebel by nature, but I actually really enjoy making people uncomfortable in a way that is good for them. So I'm not looking to make somebody uncomfortable for the sake of me enjoying their pain, but I enjoy watching people squirm a little bit and knowing that it's cracking the door open.
Mhm.
So I will push the envelope in the conversations. I will drop things into a conversation and then just see how that goes. Just have a little bit more about explicit description of what a dominatrix is, or the fact that I am a dominatrix, or opening that door and then making it so that it's okay for people to talk about the things that they're uncomfortable with,
Mhm.
because that's how we learn, that's how we grow.
How is it generally perceived when you tell people that you're a dominatrix? What is the reception like for you?
I you know what I love? So my favorite of making people uncomfortable is going to like a networking event, because this is the best. It's a mixed review. Literally slice them down the middle, and half of the people are just aghast and trying to like, suck their face in. They're like
Touching their pearls.
right. Oh my God, she said that. There's a few in the room who are like, I don't know what a dominatrix is, and I'm always like flabbergasted at that. I'm like, where have you been? Right, 150 million copies of 50 Shades of Grey, terrible book, but clearly I would have thought everybody knew what this was. But and then there's the other half of the room are secretly trying to slide me their card so that I can connect with them later. So there's a lot of curiosity about it. There's a lot more awareness about this world, right or wrong. There's just more curiosity, and I think people are starting to own the fact that, what, like, we are looking for that wilder primal side of ourselves. And kink, BDSM, is that wild primal aspect, and exploring who we are as sexual beings.
I think I want to point out too how important it is to have people like you who are knowing how to do this in a safe way, because if somebody just explores kink without really getting into it, it's so easy to go over the line, or to have something happen and then not know how to reconnect after, and bring up a trauma. So it is so important to have people that know how to do this and know how to help people through it too.
And you're reminding me that is another aspect. That's another type of client base, is couples who want to learn how to do things safely. So there's that mentorship, but hands-on mentorship. And then also people who are wanting to get into kink, and maybe they're looking for somebody that would be more of a a lifestyle partner in this. But it's a great piece to hire a professional, so that what it feels like. What it feels like to be safe. What a situation feels like when someone has your back. And so when you're going out and you're interviewing people, you don't end up with some crazy, because unfortunately, there are a lot of crazy people out there who are posing themselves as doms. And then, somebody who's new and wants to experience submission, they're like, oh, and they get all starry-eyed. They don't realize that they're just walking into the devil's den. And so for me, I really have a piece of like, I would love for those people to go and work with a professional first, just so that you get that anchored into your body and you know what to ask for.
Yeah, and learning what healthy boundaries and like having that healthy space feels like, instead of like, I don't know, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, yeah, we're hanging out with BTK, and like not quite the right thing that we're looking for here. Like, we got to choose properly.
Yeah,
I listen to too much true crime.
True crime, I know. You don't want it to turn into a CSI episode.
Yeah.
It's always like it's always this dominatrix in the thing. I'm like, oh, that's not the way it works. I know. But Hollywood.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find out more about you, or if we've got folks in Eastern Canada, if they want to work with you, or wherever your travels take you, where can they find out more about you?
So I do have an outdated website. It's danapharant.com. But if you want to just, find me, connect with me on LinkedIn, that's probably the most effective, or go through my website and send me an email. We'll talk from there. But I'm super easy to find because I am the only Dana Pharant in the world. So last name is Pharant.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's cool. Only one in
I
the
know.
world.
Only one in the world, I know.
No matter
great.
what my last name's been, my name is very common.
Yes. I actually don't have a middle name because my last name is so unique. One of those weird, quirky things.
Yeah, and, it's a fun, quirky thing. So I got lost in my thoughts.
I know we could go on for another couple of hours in all of
We
this.
could. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so if our listeners have questions, they can reach out too. So yes, I'd love for. Are you open for listeners asking you questions too? If there's anything that came up and they're like, I'd love to know more about, the kink field, about dominatrix, any of these things, like
So
looking for
I do set a
recommendations.
boundary in that
Yeah.
if, because people have like unlimited questions,
Mhm.
book a
Mhm.
session, and you can ask
Mhm.
all the questions you want, but my time is paid for. So
Absolutely.
Perfect
Yeah.
boundary. See, so book a session. Go do it, listeners.
yes.
And how would you, or what advice would you give our listeners, or someone who wants to start kind of their own pirate journey, or maybe someone that wants to get into kink and experience working with the dominatrix? So either one, what advice would you give our folks, other than booking a session with you, clearly?
Yeah. So I think if you're starting out on your pirate journey, it's to just let yourself drop into finding that inner rebel, the one that is okay with going against the grain, because that's really the big things, is being comfortable with doing things different from the way the majority do it. And then, as far as exploring the kink, I would say, pick up some books. There are some, older books, which are really great foundational pieces. Books like Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns, BDSM 101. Those are great. Steer clear of the internet until you get your foundation, just because anybody can say anything on the internet. And then, yeah, you can look around for a professional to connect with after that, but kind of get some learning under your belt, and then just let yourself explore. It's okay.
I feel like that's great advice for anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
Learn a little, stay clear of the internet, and then hire a professional. Like, and then that's for like plumbing, like,
Yeah, really?
anything really in your life.
New life rules.
Yeah. Avoid
Read a
Dr.
well-researched book, steer clear of the internet, and hire a professional.
Hire a professional.
There we
That's
go.
all you need to know.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you'd love to chat about before we finish up?
I think the one thing I didn't end up mentioning was that my year-long surrender is being turned into a book. So it's kind of a Eat, Pray, Love meets 50 Shades of Grey kind of book.
Excellent.
So if anybody wants in on the details and in on the exclusive email content, I welcome you to send me an email and I can add you to the list.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for this conversation today too. It's really good and very important.
Yeah, thank you.